in recent decades, there had been different attempts to sort of reinterpret Lincoln. And you give a number of examples. You give the example of a polemic called Why Lincoln Matters, in which you say that the author says that basically if Lincoln were alive today, his political views would pretty much be indistinguishable from those of the author. You give the example of a book by a journalist called Lincoln's Melancholy that tries to show that Lincoln was arguably suffering from something like clinical depression, and most memorably in 2005, a sex researcher and gay rights activist published a book called The Intimate World of Abraham Lincoln in the hope of proving that Lincoln was actually gay. And as a gay activist said, he's ours. And then you make this fascinating point, because you say for a century or more, generations of Americans were taught to be like Lincoln, forbearing, kind, principled, resolute. But in recent decades, what we've really wanted is to make Lincoln like us.
Yes, right.
That is a fascinating historical turnaround.
Yes, yes. Well, and it's summarized perfectly in that phrase, he's ours. And I mean, but this did go on through much of the 20th century precisely because Lincoln was understood to be a hero. Everybody wanted to be on his team. I mean, of course, I say everybody, but the majority of people. I was thinking the other day about Lincoln's religion for one reason or another. And Lincoln's religion is quite a contested subject. He was clearly an atheist when he was a young man and a skeptic, and then grew into something kind of deism as he got older. But that didn't stop everybody from wanting to say, there's a wonderful monograph by Cardinal Mundelein of Chicago from the 20s, I believe, in which he proves that Lincoln was a Catholic. And just then came across, there's a famous Hindu, or a book by a Hindu immigrant to the United States called Autobiography of a Yogi, named, his author was Paramahansa Yogananda, who in his autobiography, which is quite an interesting book, proves that Abraham Lincoln was once a Himalayan yogi, and he had been reincarnated. Mary Baker Eddy said that he had been a Christian. She's the founder of Christian Science. He had been a Christian Scientist, even though he died before Mary Baker Eddy came up with the idea of
He was
Christian
a proto-Christian Scientist.
The prototype for not going to the doctor. Anyway, so this was a universal urge on the part of Americans who they wanted. It was a way of self-validation. You know, white supremacists claimed him for a long time in the 20th century. Some very scurrilous, repulsive people claimed him as one of their own, as a prototype for white supremacy. But again, that all rests on the idea that Lincoln is a great man who you want to be close to.
You need him on your side,
Yes.
whatever argument you're making,
Right.
whether it's Hinduism, Christian Science, all sorts of things. You want Lincoln
He's a
on your side.
validator in some way.
And what do you think, just to stay on that for a second, what do you think was what do you think that tells us about that era, that you sort of rewrite the history already, before you come to the most hostile reinterpretations, that you would reinterpret history in that light and say, you know, let's use history, let's ignore the details, but make it about me?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's always been the case that history, that people who are interested in history are interested in the phrase, wonderful phrase, the usable past. That, and this is especially true in American, where everything seems to have to prove itself in utilitarian terms. What use is it? What good is it to me? So why do I need to learn about the past? Why do I need to learn about this titanic figure of Abraham Lincoln? What good is it? And self-validation is one of the reasons. And that's infected a lot of the stuff that's been written about Lincoln.
And those sort of modern attempts to make him like us, sexually more interesting, maybe mental health, all these sorts of things. These are about our age, not about
Sure,
his.
you can actually. I mean, it's a question of a historiography, which is the study of history is history. You can make a very interesting narrative about the history of the United States simply by tracing, which I do a little bit in that book, simply by tracing the way people have thought about Lincoln. And you can watch the country develop as it develops ideas about Lincoln.